When are you affirmed for who you are? When are you told that within you there is perfection and there is beauty? When does that happen? When does that happen? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. I am your host, Natalie Facey, and I am so grateful to be here with you. Today's topic is on self love. I am recording this episode just a few days after February 14th, Valentine's Day. And so, love is a topic that's on my mind. But I want to talk about self love because it's even harder to access after going through a loss or an infertility diagnosis or anything um, related to challenges around pregnancy. And so I want to explore what that might be like, what that might be like in your experience, what might be going on for you, and what might be going on for others in this birth warrior community, as I like to call it. Birth warrior meaning that you've gone through some challenge around pregnancy or birth, but you've decided not to be broken by it, right? And so even if you're not feeling like a warrior, just holding the intention or holding some opening for being a warrior, for being on that warrior journey, even that is fine. Okay. So, self love. Let me say that self love in general, in our society in general, it isn't something that we practice because it isn't something that we're taught. And so many of us are fed with images and messages about who else we should be or what else we should be doing. And so how that happens, so if you just think of watching TV for maybe 2 hours in the evening after dinner, right? And so you might watch a series, you might watch, some, whether it's like comedy or action or whatever. And in that program, there are actually ideas that you're being exposed to. There are ideas that you're being sold, right? And so if someone is a really attractive woman, if there's a really attractive woman that's the main character, the features that this person has, the reason why we think of this person as being attractive, it's what we've been taught, right? So whether it's the size of the person's body, the height, the color of the hair, the color of the eyes, the smile, the type of personality, whether it's someone that is outspoken or witty or whatever. Those are things that we're taught through ongoing messaging about what beauty is, right? And so in movies, series, in these programs, we're being sold ideas. If someone has bought a car or a house or whatever, we're being shown ideas of what the ideal life looks like, right? And so there's already some standard that's in our minds, and this is a standard that we're being fed over and over again. Now, if we aren't living that standard, then we usually hold ourselves in the position of being less than. In our minds, there is still something that we need to aspire to in order to be enough, right? It's like we're not quite there yet because this thing hasn't happened. We haven't lost this much weight, or, we haven't gotten this hairdo, or we haven't gotten this partner, something hasn't occurred yet, so that we're not able to accept ourselves yet, right? Because of these messaging that we continue to be fed over and over. We aren't fed messages about perfection, or that imperfection is actually it's like this, it's that's the true beauty, right? Or differences or uniqueness, the thing that's imperfect or different about us. We there You'll very rarely see a commercial about that. And if you do, then it's basically a play on that idea to sell a product. Right. So let's talk about commercials now. I started with, the movies, the programming, the shows, and in between the shows, right, whether it's YouTube or your normal TV, there are commercials, and commercials are selling you a product or a service directly, and how they convince you to purchase said product or service is by showing you what's missing in your life, or by showing you something to aspire to. So I actually find it really fun. No, I used to find it fun. I used to find it interesting and fun to sit and analyze commercials because I used to work in advertising. And now I am mostly annoyed by them because it's just these ongoing messages about what's missing, right? Whether it's something about your hair to get it straight, or to get it curly, or to get it shinier, or something about your skin to get it more vibrant or tighter and looking younger, or the car that you're driving. And it's interesting to see certain groups being targeted, like whatever the person looks like in the ad, that's the person who's being targeted. So it's interesting to see that and know that everything is intentional, like the colors that people are wearing, obviously everything that they're saying, the images, every single detail was picked out because all of those things create some emotional response within us, right? So if you see a really sweet moment between um a couple, they might be, somewhere outside, and the lighting is this like warm sort of glow that it just makes you feel good inside. We remember these commercials, and we create an emotional reaction to the brand, right? An emotional attachment to the brand based on what we're seeing in the commercials. So I'm saying all of that to say, within our normal day-to-day life, or let's say within our family unit, we aren't taught much about self-love. And so where we are exposed to other things outside of our family life, which is, through the media, whether it's the TV or magazines, almost all of the messaging is about what you need to buy or what you need to change in order to be whatever the standard is that someone else has decided on, right? And depending on the religious institution that you're a part of, you might not be one, but depending on the religious organization, there might be more messaging around imperfection and what needs to change. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with religious institutions, but when are you affirmed for who you are? When are you told that within you there is perfection and there is beauty? When does that happen? When does that happen? And so that's life not having gone through pregnancy loss. That's life not having gone through the very traumatic and shattering experience of losing a baby or babies. or being told that you might not have children, right? That's the normal life and the disconnection with loving ourselves. It just isn't a part of our programming. It isn't a part of our upbringing. If you think of life as a curriculum, it's not one of the courses, it's not there. And so it's something that we have to be taught often later on in life. And the other interesting part about that is, after you've gone through something really difficult, really painful, something that shatters your sense of self, that shatters whatever image you had of who you were before, however frail it was before, or it could have been strong, right? But considering just the society that we live in and the really toxic messaging that we're fed, most of us don't have strong self-confidence, right? Like it isn't something that was really firm to begin with. And so having gone through something like loss or infertility that is directly connected to the body, and many of us identify as women, and there is so much objectification of women, right? So it's all of it is really messed up, and it really fucks with you after a loss. Like it really messes with you after infertility. It really does, because again, that foundation wasn't there. And when we're taught that the purpose of our bodies is to give pleasure to our partner and make babies and to look good in a short dress, when some of those things or none of those things aren't happening, then we might feel as though we have no purpose, right? If the baby making isn't happening, if we're not proud of our bodies, if we're actually ashamed of our bodies, and if there is distance in the intimate relationship, then it feels as though there's no purpose that you serve. And that thought is, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard one, and yet so many people are living that, right? This might feel like something that you're living right now. And so that's why we're talking about self-love, because I I want to be able to share things that can support you in reflecting on how it's showing up in your life. And if it's not showing up, that's also okay. There is so much power in having this kind of awareness, right? Because I think how most of us are programmed, and when I use the word programmed, I mean it's the messaging that we're fed over and over again until we accept something, even unconsciously, right? It's have you ever heard a song over and over again, and when it first came out, you kind of hated it? And then you found yourself singing it without being able to stop? Well, that song has been programmed in your mind, basically. And that's a whole other thing. Like, I could go on for ages talking about the media and how we eventually accept messages, ideas, philosophies, um, perceptions of beauty, and um, just all kinds of things. I could go on and on talking about it and how we're exposed to things and eventually accept them unconsciously. And so, yeah, in our programming, the self love is it's something that isn't as accessible. It's something that it isn't easy to reach, or it isn't there. It's as though we have to be something before we can love who we are. We have to be something else or someone else before we can love who we are. And of course, it could be very different, right? Like if children were taught that they were perfect just as they were, regardless of whatever score they got in class, regardless of who's at the top, regardless of who won the race, if children were, if their uniqueness and their power, their inner power, their worth, if that was affirmed over and over again, then it's a different experience as they're growing up. But from very young, we're taught the separation among ourselves. We hear terms like, who's the prettiest, who's the smartest, whose parent has these resources. And we start to put ourselves and put other people into categories of good, better, best, whatever those descriptions are, whatever those categories are, we start separating ourselves into those categories instead of honoring our wholeness, right? Honoring that even though we're different, we're still whole. Even though we're imperfect, there's still perfection in that. And we're still innately worthy. We aren't taught that. We are not taught that. We're taught to keep striving towards being something other than who we are. We're usually shown a standard and we're taught to aspire to that. Whether it's getting a certain grade in school, or it's making some team that has a limited number of spots, or it's participating in a contest and being awarded a prize or not. So all of these experiences separate us. And all of these experiences, depending on how they played out in your life, whether it's your childhood or teenage years or early adulthood or whatever stage, depending on how they played out, they might have been defining moments for you. They might have been moments in which you told yourself a story about not being good enough, being a failure, needing to work really hard to prove yourself, needing to work really hard to be accepted, and needing to be careful about failing in the future, right? We grow up with these wounds. And what happens is when there is a new wound, when there is the loss or the infertility diagnosis or the birthing experience that didn't go the way that you planned, then these stories reemerge, these stories of failure, these stories of not being good enough, these stories of not being worthy, they come back up. It's not like they disappeared, they were already there, but just under the surface. And they come back up in a way that feel even more unbearable because we have no tools to work through them. We don't have many tools to work through the wounds that come up. And a part of it is also because we're not taught to. We're taught to dismiss them. We're taught to focus on the positive. What else are we taught? Yeah, mostly to focus on the positive. And sometimes we don't have the time, right? Because life is happening, life is going on, the hustle continues. And so what happens is there is wound on top of wound, bringing you to a deeper place of hurt, a deeper place of shame, a deeper place of regret, a deeper place of resentment. And it might feel as though anything else might break you. It might feel as though you're holding on for dear life and, like you might be pleading just like nothing else, God, nothing else. Like I can't take one more thing. And life is unpredictable. We don't know if there might be another thing and when it might come. And so instead of holding your breath, and instead of holding those emotions, the regret, the anger, the resentment, the shame, instead of holding those emotions in your body, and holding things against yourself, let's explore what self-love might look like. And self-love might be revolutionary because, again, we aren't taught that. I think the first time when I heard the term self-love, I can't remember the first time when I heard it, but I think the perception that I had of it was that it was being vain, like someone who was always looking at themselves in the mirror, someone who taught, who thought, not taught, someone who thought too much of themselves. And what's that anyways, thinking too much of yourself? And I know that that's a part of my own upbringing because in our culture in Jamaica, where I was raised, we're taught to be humble. We're taught, and I wouldn't say it's all of Jamaica because obviously, different people have different personalities. So maybe it was in my family, right? Being taught to be humble, being taught not to brag about yourself. Yeah, that was never a thing. That was never a thing. Bragging. Um, yeah, and I'm sure it might be the same in your culture, right? Or your subculture. You might be able to relate to that. How people who honor themselves or celebrate themselves, how others might look at them with disdain. Right? That's interesting. And how beautiful it is to actually celebrate something unique about yourself. What if we all had a practice around that, celebrating ourselves and celebrating each other? How different that is from the separation and the judgment that comes with the separation. Right? Naming someone as not being good enough or something as not being good enough. When we could just celebrate the beauty, celebrate the uniqueness within ourselves and within other people. All right, so I actually have notes, so let me follow the notes. I want to talk about ways that a lack of self love might show up, right? So, if we aren't being loving towards ourselves, what are things that might show up in its place? So, there might be shame. And where shame comes in is the feeling that your body failed you, right? And not only did it fail you, then it might have failed you publicly. Because if your pregnancy was at a certain stage, or even if it was your first pregnancy, right, then you would have been sharing it likely. People would have seen you pregnant, and then they would have seen you not being pregnant. And so it's the shame that comes with that, feeling as though your body's broken and that you're being judged for that, right? So another one is regret, feeling as though you did something wrong or that you didn't do something in time, right? You should have done something sooner. And if you had done that thing sooner, then it would have made the outcome different. And who knows? Who knows, and how would you have known? How would you have known to do that thing sooner when you were in the past, in that moment in time, without the information to do anything sooner? Unless you have some super psychic, clairvoyant skills, then you would not have known. And I find that a lot of times when we have regrets, it's wanting things to be different when really there was no control, right? Like, how could things have been different when it's now that you have the information that you have and not in that moment, right? And so there might be regret as one of the emotions that you're holding in your body, and that's holding the place where self love could be, holding the place where self compassion could be. The next one is guilt. And guilt might show up because you're feeling as though you're preventing your partner from being the parent they want to be. Or you might have in laws, right? Like your partner's parents. Or it could be your parents who's wanting to be grandparents or wanting to have more grandchildren. And you feel guilt because of the perception that it's your body that is preventing that that desire from being a possibility, right? And it could be a whole host of things, but That's another podcast episode. And I've spoken about them in other podcast episodes. So we won't get into that today. Actually, I'm remembering that in one of our recent rebirth sessions, which is the group course that I'm leading, I talked about toxins in the body and things around us like our air freshener and the deodorant and makeup and all kinds of things that are a part of our daily lives that actually impact pregnancy and fertility. So definitely um, connect with me so I can share more about rebirth if you're interested in going deeper on that topic. Okay. So after guilt comes comparison and more shame. And let's say that your partner has kids from a prior relationship, right? And we're going to bring in the comparison again and the separation. So there might be the sense or the story that you're the upgrade, right? Like you're the upgrade. If your partner isn't with that person from before, it's because you're the upgrade, right? It's because the relationship that you have formed with your partner is a better one than the relationship that they had before, clearly, right? And so, if that's the story that's going on, there's also the expectation that if your partner wants to have kids or in this new relationship, then you know kids ought to be a part of it. And as the upgrade, as the better and new partner, then it's as though that should happen. Like your body just needs to get with the program, right? And see how that again is a form of separation, right? A form of putting things um, in different levels, right? The good, better, best. And how with that separation, there's the expectation that certain things should happen, and if it's not happening, there's shame that's associated with that. And if that wasn't in the equation at all, if that comparison wasn't in the a part of the dynamic at all, then the pregnancy journey or challenges on the pregnancy journey, it could feel a little bit more tolerable, right? But because there is at the back of your mind this idea that you might need to be better, right? You might need to give your partner more than what your partner got in the previous relationship, then it feels like there is more pressure. So just something to consider if that's a part of your setup. Okay. So those are some of the emotions, right? Obviously not all of them because we we have a lot of emotions. We feel a lot of things. But with all of that, what is usually the common experience is unforgiveness. It's unforgiveness. And you can think of unforgiveness as a stone or a wall that's been hardened around your heart. And so your heart is still there. The love is still there. The capacity for love is still there. However, it's limited by the stone that is around it. When your heart is wanting to expand and love or appreciate or connect, it puts limits on that. And, all of those things, like you can think of it as externally, right? To connect with might be your partner or to love a new idea, to be excited about something for the future, then there are limits on that. And then looking inward at ourselves, that gets even more interesting. And I think the reason why that happens is because we aren't in the practice, or because we haven't been in the practice of loving up on ourselves, of being kind and compassionate towards ourselves, then the shift isn't as obvious, right? So you might notice when you're holding back love from your partner pretty quickly, right? Your partner might notice and you might notice it like really quickly. But when you're doing it to yourself, you might not notice, because the level of love or compassion or care that you might have been showing to yourself, it might have been at of a much lower level. Like the baseline might have been very different. Let's say that your love and care towards your partner was at, let's say that that baseline is 80%. So on any given day, you're at 80. Maybe towards yourself, it might be very different, really different. And know that as I say this, I have lived this. um, and one point that I'll share is that I was trained as a coach in the Love Yourself, Heal Your Life philosophy of Louise Hay. I was basically trained as a teacher of love, self love specifically, right? Love yourself, heal your life. And the reason why I was drawn to that practice is because I needed it, right? And so I'm just going to say that the fact that I'm talking about this, the fact that that is the training that I wanted to have for myself, it's because that was a part of my journey and still is, right? Because we can only go deeper in our healing, deeper and deeper. So, yes, just wanted to make that point that there isn't judgment here. It's basically sharing from what I have seen and also experienced, right? And so the level of love or compassion and care that you might have towards your partner and others, it might be very different from what you have towards yourself. And again, we've already established that it isn't like self love isn't something that we practice. And especially if you were raised in a, in the traditional sense of being a woman, right? Like what we're taught traditionally that being a woman is, it's usually being a caretaker, and it's being the caretaker of everyone else, especially the men around. So it's being the caretaker, learning to be the caretaker of your husband or your partner, being the caretaker of your children. And what do? We raise girls to do the same thing. And so we grow up as women and we do the same thing. We learn to care for others. We do it in our families, and when we go to work, we do the same damn thing. So there isn't much practice around caring for ourselves, around showing ourselves the love that we extend to others. And so, yes, self love is hard. And it's harder for us. And it's harder when we've gone through any experience relating to the body. It is. Because our worth, all of the messaging that we're taught, our worth is tied into what our bodies can or cannot do. So there's a lot here. There's a lot. And I want you to show yourself so much compassion, right? I would love to invite you to hold a space of so much compassion for yourself because, again, this isn't something that we're taught. There is no model for this. It isn't something that's a part of the course of life. So it means that when we go through these really challenging experiences and we find that we're stuck, healing often means, going through some kind of reprogramming, going through some kind of retraining, going through the unlearning and then the relearning, right? So I was sharing earlier about unforgiveness and how it's like having something hardened around your heart or having something that blocks your heart. And I was saying that in our bodies, we might not be as in tuned to when we don't show ourselves love, right? Because we haven't had the practice to do that to begin with, right? And so, yeah, it might be easier to be unkind to ourselves. I'm pretty sure that if you think through this, you'll find that it's true. The words that we say to ourselves, we might never think of actually voicing those words to other people. The criticisms that we have of ourselves, like we would never say to someone else, just never. And yet they go on and on in our minds because we've practiced it, right? Because we've practiced it and because we tend to be harder on ourselves. Again, we're taught to be kinder to others than we are to ourselves. So, something else that was interesting that came up for me as I was starting to put together notes for this topic is that, with unforgiveness, it means that we are in this present moment holding love from ourselves because of something that happened in the past. So it means that we're not actually living in the present, we're living in the past. If you were to buy a puppy right now, or a cat, some pet that you love, then that pet would just love you in this moment, right? That pet is meeting you right now and they're loving you right now in this moment. They don't care about what you did and who you think you are. And in any way that you think that you failed in the past, they don't care about that. Like they're just loving you right now. And the same thing happens with people when they're newly in love, right? Someone meets you and they're fascinated by you. They're like, oh my gosh, where have you been all of my life? I've never met someone so incredible. And in your mind, you're like, yeah, wait until you get to meet the real me. What's that about, right? What's that about? And it's because you're holding the idea of who you think you are based on what happened in the past. And you know what I'm wondering? Just how much you must have grown, right? If you're able to see any separation between who you are right now and who you were in the past, if you're able to actually identify differences in how you wish you had behaved, in how you wish you handled a situation, in how you wish you had shown up, then it means that there's growth. Because if you're not able to recognize any differences, then it means that you're the same person and that growth hasn't occurred. And there would be nothing for you to complain about because you did back then. You showed up however you showed up, just as you would right now. But that's not the case, is it? The reason why you can say, oh, I wish I did, or I wish I never did, or I wish that were different, it's because you're different. And isn't that something beautiful to celebrate? That you have grown. And so if you've grown, can you honor the growth versus hold on to regret or resentment for the mistakes or what you consider to be a mistake, for the missed opportunities, or for whatever you consider to be failure? Instead of the judgment or the shame, can you soften the grip around your heart and replace that with understanding? Understanding for the person who you were at that moment in that time, and that that person actually made the best choice based on the options that were laid out before them, based on the cards that they were dealt. That person, you in the past, you actually made the best choice. Is there an opening for that in your heart? Can you pause and allow yourself to breathe that in? Yeah, I just took a breath with you. This knowing that you did the best you could, that you have always been doing your best. That right now in this moment, you're choosing the best choice based on the options that you have, based on the circumstances that you're in, based on what you're navigating, you're making the best choice. Based on what you have the capacity for, you are making the best choice. Based on the support that you have, you're making the best choice. And so imagine a couple of years from now, complaining about something that you aren't doing right now when there's no way, like, how would you have done it? How? I was actually having this conversation with myself today because I was complaining about something that I didn't do last week. And I was like, wait, last week was a busy week. I did so many things last week. How would I have had time to do this other thing that I'm now complaining about? I can do it now. Like the time is now, but the time was sure as heck not last week. Last week was a different week, right? So I have to catch myself sometimes like, all right, calm down with the criticism. Let's actually try to remember what that schedule looked like, right? And so here we are with compassion and making a new choice based on the options that we have before us now, right? Here we are in the present. And so going back to this idea of meeting someone for the first time who is loving you in the present, who is loving you for how you're showing up and your brilliance in this moment and your perfection and imperfection in this moment, your uniqueness, meeting you in this moment and appreciating you. while you're thinking of all the things that you should have done, all the ways that you may have failed in the past. And really, what's happened, it's not simply those experiences. What's happened is that from those experiences, you have created a story about yourself, right? You've created a story about the type of person who you are as a result of those experiences. And there cannot be self love without self forgiveness. It's not possible because we're always going to do things that we eventually regret. Like it's the stuff of life. All right. And again, that's a part of how we grow. And so without pausing and creating room for the self forgiveness, then we walk around with these heavy emotions, with the regrets, with the pain, with the stories about who we are, and the pressure or the desperation to catch up and fix something or to catch up and be someone else. When if we were to pause and create as much room as possible in this moment for the forgiveness, then whatever it is that we think we're running after, right? Like whatever other person we need to be in order to be worthy of love, then that is no longer in the question. Because you recognize pretty quickly through this practice of self forgiveness that you are worthy of love, and that there's nothing, there's no one else that you have to be before you can get to that point of loving yourself. And it takes practice. Just as the messages are going to go in your mind over and over again about whatever the negative voice is, whatever the voice of criticism is, whatever the voice of judgment is, just as those things are repeating themselves in your mind, you get to replace those things over time with other messaging that affirm who you are, that affirm your power. Okay. This is reminding me that one of the other topics that we did in the rebirth course the other day was on the inner mother and the inner child. And, tuning into what the voice of the inner mother is. Is it one that's loving? Or is it one that's critical and judgmental? And if that's the case, that's okay. How do we start to shift that so that the inner child feels nurtured and loved and supported? This is my favorite definition for self love, actually. We can call it a lot of things, but the definition that I like to use for myself is that I will always have my back. I am never going to abandon me. I'm not going to do it. And I might do it in a moment, right? Like, criticize myself, like, oh, I can't believe you did this thing, it should have been done that way. Like that might come up. But then I shift into, oh, well, how did that happen, right? What was going on for you so that we're where we are right now? It's like showing that compassion, creating space for that love. And I like using that reminder of never abandoning me or always having my back, because we're all we've got, right? Each of us, we are all we've got. Because anyone can walk out of your life at any point. Anyone can decide that they feel a different way at any point. Anyone can be in a certain mood at any point. And so, if your source of love and peace and acceptance is dependent on someone else, then you might want to shift your strategy a little bit so that that acceptance and that love and that peace comes from you. Like you ought to be your greatest source for all of those things because everyone's going through something. Everyone's going through their thing. And the deeper the relationship that we have with ourselves, the more compassion that we can cultivate towards ourselves, it's actually the more compassion that we can cultivate towards other people. Because it starts with getting to a point in your own relationship with yourself so that you can understand why things happen, so that you can understand why you might have the emotions that you have those things come up and actually still arrive at a place of love. And if you're not able to do that for yourself, then it's actually really pretty hard to do that for someone else. It's hard to accept someone else and to love them unconditionally without getting to that place where you access that within yourself. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's, yeah, I don't want to say it's impossible, but the self love has to be there. It has to be there. Otherwise, it's this really weird situation where the love that you have for yourself, it's dependent on, you know, the it's dependent on the status of the relationship with someone else. Right? Like how good both of you are in the moment. And so you always want to be able to be your greatest source of love. You always want to be able to be your source of love. You always want to be able to fill your cup back up. That was a weird sentence. Fill your cup back up. Yeah, you want to be able to do that. Right? Loving yourself in the present moment versus being resentful of yourself in the past. That resentment would be of your past self, not yourself today. Who's the person today? What's that person capable of? Like, what wisdom does that person have? What power does that person have, having gone through the experiences of the past? How has that person grown? Like, I would love for you to get to know that person. They sound pretty freaking awesome, right? I would love for you to be able to look in the mirror and be like, damn, you are awesome. Like, I love you. I am so glad that I am you. Like, I wouldn't choose to be anyone else but you. Like, oh my gosh, give me a hug. And you just squeeze yourself in a hug. Like, yeah, definitely encourage doing that. Yes. And so, you know, Some of the steps that you can explore is first just starting to think through what that looks like for you, what your relationship with self love is right now. Just thinking through that. And if it's dependent on your relationship with someone else, is it dependent on you supporting someone else? Like, would you need to support someone else in order to feel fulfilled and happy within yourself? Or can you find a source of love that doesn't involve other people? And that one might be tricky because, you know, we often discover who we are in our interactions with other people. Like someone might say, "Oh, I love the way you do this," or "You're very good at that." Right? And so we're social beings and we need other people. But if you need someone else, like if you have to interact with someone else in order to feel whole or full or happy, then maybe look at that to see what might be going on there. Right? Because it means that if that's not there, then you might not actually have a source of love. That source of love might be coming from how that person makes you feel when they show appreciation. Now, is there something that you could do for yourself? And would that fill you up? Would that give you the same or a similar sense of appreciation? So that's one thing to explore. And the next is ways that love can be expressed. I think that love is self forgiveness. And it's something that you can practice in the moment with small things, right? You don't have to go back to the big, painful, traumatic thing if it feels too heavy, if it feels like, it's living in a different neighborhood from forgiveness right now. However, if there are things that are happening right now, like little mistakes, like you wake up late or you forgot to do something, like practice forgiveness around that. Start telling yourself a different story because it means that you don't add to the pile of hurt. You don't add to the story. You don't give that further confirmation or affirmation that you're this type of person. Like, start to show compassion to yourself right now. Change the story right now. Because most likely there's a reason for whatever is happening. Right? And so you can insert some compassion instead of the judgment. And then connected to that is speaking to yourself in a loving way. So I mentioned the exercises around the inner child and the inner mother, and there's so many ways that that can be done. But speaking to yourself as though that little child is inside of you. So what are kind ways that you could say something? How would you replace the judgment or the criticism with some kindness? Mhm. Another one is smiling at yourself in the mirror, saying positive things, looking at your body if it feels comfortable and honoring your body, seeing yourself with love. Mhm. And if all of those feel hard, it's having the courage to try in any small way, having the courage to try. There is so much more to this topic of self-love, like so much more. And I could talk for hours. I could write an entire book. But this is what's present for me today, and I wanted to share it. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope that this was a sweet little pause in your day. And I hope that it inspired you in exploring ideas for what self love might look like in your day. Know that you are so worthy of it. And if you don't have it, like, what? Why else are we here? Right? If you don't have the love for yourself, what are we doing? Why else are we here? Because isn't everything that we do, isn't all of it so that we can get to a place of love? This is why we're here. And so by starting there, by starting at the destination, you get to be full while you're on the journey, right? You get to be experiencing so much joy and really experiencing more of yourself, more of your wholeness while we're on the journey. Okay? So I am sending you love. I'm sending you lots of love. And if you find that you'd like some support as you're on this journey of healing, or pregnancy after loss, pregnancy after fertility, and I do like stressing the healing, right? I do like placing emphasis on the healing because it doesn't mean that you have to be ready to become pregnant again. But how beautiful is it that you get to do the inner healing so that when you're pregnant or as you're planning to become pregnant, you have these tools. Okay? So if you'd like some extra support as you're on your journey, if you'd like us to go deeper in exploring these tools and what it's like to practice them on a daily basis, feel free to connect with me so that we can explore working together. I am at hello@nataliefacey.com, and you will find that in the show notes. It's also hello, HELLO, at NATALEEF as in Frank, ACEY.com. And my website is my name, nataliefacey.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at The Birth Warriors. So thank you for joining this episode, and I will see you next time. Until then, sending you lots and lots of love. Bye.